National Cabinet is discussing data centre regulation today, with the Prime Minister set to outline conditions on renewable energy sources and locations of the centres. The meeting comes as developers face growing objections from local communities across the country. Joining us here in the studio this afternoon, the CEO of Data Centres Australia, Belinda Dennett. Good afternoon, Belinda. Thanks for coming in. The government seems intent on bringing in some level of regulation. Do the data centres support that?
We do support the framework. Bringing on additional renewable energy is something the sector is committed to. Trying to find most efficient ways to use water is also something the industry is very focused on. And we like the idea of a national framework that sets clear rules for the industry. Okay,
you talk about the energy use. The AEMO released yesterday some information about the projected electricity demand over the next 10 years or so, going from 5 terawatt hours to 34, so a magnitude of 6 times. How are you going to meet that with renewables?
So, signing power purchase agreements to bring on new renewable energy projects. But data centres actually play a really critical role in this energy transition, underwriting new projects that perhaps otherwise wouldn't be built. The AEMO report also pointed out how important data centres are to add stability to a renewable energy mix, so reliable and steady off-takers. Often we get too much renewable energy in the system, which makes it unstable. So data centres can play this really important role. Importantly, it also talked about the time we have to build that out. So I think there's an opportunity here, and it's a win for this energy transition.
It's a huge amount of power, though. Increasing our electricity production by 6 times over the next 10 years. Now, if that's renewables, that's thousands and thousands and thousands of wind turbines. It's thousands of acres of solar farms. Where are they going to go?
Well, we know there's a lot of projects in the pipeline, something like 40 gigawatts of pipeline development. What they need is someone to underwrite and offtake that agreement. So they're in the system, and with data centres now signing on to these purchase agreements, we can make that happen.
40 gigawatts is not 34 terawatts, it's nowhere near it. A wind farm can take anywhere between 4 and 9 years from application to completion. So, we get to 10 years' time and these wind farms might have been built. There's a big lag there between data centres being built and when the renewable energy will come online.
There is a time challenge, and that is something the industry is concerned about. We will need other parts of energy in the mix to get there.
Like what?
Well, gas has been talked about as a firming opportunity. Solar is also part of the mix. That comes on a lot more quickly.
Would you like to see nuclear?
That is not something that we're entertaining or our members are entertaining. They're decisions for the government of the day.
But you'd take the nuclear power if it was there?
Our operators are technology neutral, and in other markets where nuclear is viable, that is an option, but in Australia that's a decision for the government.
There's nuclear power in the UK, they're dealing with these same issues. There's a huge data centre that's been approved for Leicestershire in the UK, 1.7 million square metres. Now that's about the size of Sydney's Centennial Park. Do you foresee a world in Australia where we have huge data centres the size of Centennial Park popping up?
So we haven't seen that in Australia yet. I guess that depends on the policy settings, it depends on the energy availability, and it just depends on customer appetite to place them here in Australia. That's why forecasting 10 years out is challenging, because so many of the decisions that get made will be dependent on policy settings and the regulatory framework in Australia.
Okay, the government talks about trying to limit the amount of data centres near places like schools, housing, agricultural production. It's pretty clear that data centres are already near housing in particular and in the agricultural setting. Are we going to have to see a rethink about where these data centres go? If they can't go in these places, where can they go?
Well, look, these are decisions for councils, for state governments in their planning regimes. At the moment, data centres are built on industrial land. That's a decision of the planning regimes. So we respect that, and we'll abide by that process.
The Prime Minister said last night that maintaining social licence will be essential. Do you think that you're losing the PR battle?
Certainly we understand communities are concerned. We've been building data centres in Australia for around 20 years, but the scale and the speed at which we're building is certainly giving rise to community questions and concerns. We need to do more as an industry to hear those concerns, to answer their questions, and I think you'll see the industry starting to do more of that.
So what's the message? I mean, what's the message you're going to put forward that will help you potentially win that battle to win over communities?
Well, I think it's not so much a message, it's hearing what their concerns are and being able to answer those questions. I've been to some of our members' community consultations, and when their questions are genuinely addressed, and they do go to power and water and location, they walk out feeling a lot more comfortable. Communities want to have a say, and they should.
The tech companies, most of them are overseas, driving this huge growth here. A lot of them are American, and there's big community issues in America as well, where people are turning against these data centres being built. Does it seem like the Americans are planting these data centres in Australia because it might be easier to get them built?
Look, I don't think that's the case. In Australia, 87% of data centre capacity is what we call co-location data centres. They're not built by the global tech companies. The majority of those are Australian-founded and headquartered companies. So I think what we're seeing in the US is actually part of the regulatory framework that they didn't have in place. A lot of what they're doing now is catching up to the Australian scheme, where data centres are required to pay their own way, pay for energy. We've always had those measures in place.
Okay, just finally, there is talk about whether there should be a moratorium on data centres because this legislation may take some time to go through and be signed off. Should we hit pause on data centres until we know what the rules are going to be?
Look, what we see with moratoriums that have been imposed in other markets is that investment just shifts elsewhere. So Singapore had a moratorium, the investment moved to Malaysia. We don't think that's good for Australia or Australians. We've put out a report today saying there's $40 to $50 billion of investment in the next 3 to 4 years. And that's creating 19,000 construction jobs, 23,000 ongoing jobs. Australia would lose that if it hit pause. We don't think that's the aim. The government's put out its framework and its laws. Members are abiding by those now. So I don't think there is need for a moratorium to get a framework that we already largely know what that looks like.
Okay, it's a big challenge ahead. It's not going to go away. This is a conversation that's going to continue. Belinda Dennett, thanks for coming in today.
Thanks you.